So, are there any other pieces of the book you'd like to just final thoughts?
Let me look at my notes.
Like, okay.
Oh, another thing that they mentioned this on their podcast, and what's great is, they're not overtly religious people, but everything, so much of the stuff that they talk about is like there's a moral reason, or there's a logical reason why we need to act morally, or why there's, why it's in our best interest as humans, as our best interest as Homo sapiens to behave a certain way. And, one of the ones that comes to mind is not gaming the system. And the way, when they say that, when I think of it, I think of like an example of, there's a Costco in Hawaii that you can, rent, boogie boards and all your like vacation stuff there, as soon as you get off the plane, and then go have your vacation. And then because they have like a no questions asked return policy, you can return all the stuff when you leave and not pay for it and get your money back. And I think that, maybe I'm thinking it the wrong way, but that's what gaming the system means to me. And, teaching our kids that that's not good, and it's not just a moral reason. And I can't remember exactly what their rationale behind that being, wrong, but it's, I guess, basically because, if you're ruining it for everybody else, and it's not honorable to game the system, and that can happen in politics and all sorts of other things.
Right. Well, yeah, you shouldn't return a surfboard with a big old shark bite out of it because it's unserviceable.
Well,
right?
even if you return it and it's in good shape, you used it for,
right.
For a week or two, and it's just not right.
Yeah, that reminds me of something, Brett, I've heard him talk about a couple of times, of the three types of people who are in politics. One is people who will do the right thing no matter what, which is very few. Then there's most people they want to do the right thing, but they don't because no one else does, or it's easier not to. And then there's the third small group, which is people who just don't want to do the right thing. And I feel like the example you gave, Todd, if everyone's doing that, you're making that second group larger and larger. The second and third groups are just, it might be a surf shop in Hawaii, but, that becomes a habit that translates to other areas of life. So it's like, I think that's a really valuable lesson from the book.
Thanks for fleshing that out. That was the second side of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So are there any final thoughts for you, Eric, about something that kind of, a next step, or something that you'd like to hear next from Heather and Brett, but this book just kind of led you down to the path and you're like, now what? Or I don't understand this piece.
I think that this book, I think I mentioned before, just gives a really nice framework for thinking about the things in your world that I think this is the best thing I've ever read that has kind of given me that evolutionary perspective on things, which has been really cool. But I think one of the things that is most timely and most needed is just more explorations on fourth frontier thinking, more explorations on, are there more examples from our past that we can recreate today? I think they go into the Mayans, was it? I think they talk about, and the public projects that they took on that would be cut back in times of famine. Like, maybe more modeling of things like that, more explorations. And I know there's a lot of great thinkers in their world and publicly that are doing similar work. So it'd be cool to see some sort of, public facing collaboration, like a book or a workbook or a seminar or a workshop or something that's just all about this idea. And, they could maybe have Brett and Heather bring their evolutionary perspective to the conversation. Daniel Schmottenberger brings his more analytical kind of down and dirty framework. I don't know. I just think that there needs to be more public explorations of that fourth frontier idea.
I love that idea.
I was gonna say, I'm glad you brought that up, Eric, because that one of your other questions, Kimberly, was what part of the book left you still having questions or you didn't understand. And that area about the Mayans and about the feast and famine, there's a paragraph that just did not make sense to me, and maybe you guys can help make sense out of it. It was like they said, in times of feast, instead of just having more and more children, this says something like they would actually put that food towards building monuments or building things, public works. And I don't quite understand how that works. Did that make sense to you guys?
The way I read it was, when you're having good times, up times, that's the time to make beauty and art and grow community. And when you're in the down times or the famine times, you will not do that. So when you're having the feast times, if you go ahead and do that, then you will still have the beauty and the culture and the art when you're in the down times.
Oh,
that's how I read it.
Okay, that kind of makes sense.
Is that right, Eric? What do you think?
I think that's a good way of looking at it. That's how I looked at it. I guess.
Okay, maybe I just misread, or maybe my mind went down the wrong path when I was reading it.
I listened to it, Todd, so sometimes that gives you clues because of the tone and inflection. And we hear Heather read a lot on the Dark Horse podcast, and so it was very easy for me to listen to her read her own book because she reads so much on the podcast. And so Brett reads too, but it seems like Heather did the lion's share, and I think it was confusing, and I think I only understood it because she read it out loud.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I read that as like, what are the resources going, like looking at their time as just having a finite amount of resources. And if there's, like you said, Kimberly, whenever it's famine time, you have more resources to maybe feed workers, or I don't know. I was looking at it as just like where's your resources at?
Yeah, a lot of times in American culture, we think of, we get a bonus and we buy a car or a vacation or more food or fancier clothes. And obviously that wasn't part of the Mayan culture. It was, what can we create with these extra resources at this time? Because we know from experience that there will be downtimes. So what can we do that will benefit us all during the downtimes when we do have plenty? That would be
maybe
great.
another way of looking at it is, instead of, if it's a boon time and it's a feast time, instead of gorging yourself and doing stuff for your family, and obviously they couldn't buy Mercedes and things like that, but buying riches, or their version of conspicuous consumption goods,
chocolate.
Chocolate. Oh yeah, Mayan chocolate. So instead of that, you put the collective money towards public work that's going to show you beauty in the famine times. That makes sense.
Yeah, and to just have something that everyone is like a collective consciousness type of thing, that we all recognize that this thing is being worked on. And in famine, it's more like, let's survive, let's get by as a society. But whenever it's feast time, it's kind of this group effort. I always think about and maybe someone said this before, but the 60s and the moon landing, the moon projects, how that was something we all were behind. The whole country wanted it to happen. And it was almost like that public works idea of everyone is committed to seeing this happen. That helps people relate and get through.
So last question, how do you see our podcast, Unity Now, in relationship to the Fourth Frontier?
Wow, that's not one that you sent out beforehand, Kimberly.
I know. I try to prepare the guests, but not always. Improv.
For me, I think it's the fourth frontier is all about discovery and finding emergent ways of doing things. And that requires dialogue, and that requires understanding what people want who maybe don't think the same as you, right? We need to all commit to this fourth frontier for it to work. There needs to be buy-in across the board. So that requires people across the board talking with each other. And I think that's one thing that the Unity Now podcast is all about, is improving dialogue between different differences. So I think that is an essential feature of the fourth frontier.
I think I was thinking almost tangentially, some of the people I've been listening to in the podcast and whatnot, they're talking about different ways of, for lack of a better word, financing the internet, as opposed to ad-based and, click-based and all that. And I don't know if it was, I can't remember who it was, but it's one of these super brainiac people coming up with these ideas. And I mean, if we can help foster some of that and maybe, expose those ideas to more and more people, then that's a way that we could be, influencing the fourth frontier.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. I feel as if we do a couple of things, and I echo what Eric and you, Todd, said, that we're trying to build a different dialogue and to come at things in a different way. I also think we're questioning folks that want to have a single vision.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing that with ourselves. I think it's interesting that I don't know people's political affiliation. And 2 years ago, I would have known everybody's because that was important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think it's a lot less interesting. I think knowing their specific position and why and how they got to that position is vastly more interesting to me. So I think that nurturing that inside myself, having you all encourage that and support it, and also be moving towards that goal, and then indirectly everybody that listens to our podcast, like we're all on this journey together to learn how to not have old thinking or non-serving thinking, right? And like our last guest said, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, what's still good here? What still works here?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a big theme from Brett and Heather just in general. It's like, it's much easier. It's easier to tear down stuff than to build it. And so instead of tearing everything down without having an idea of how to build something better, it's not a good idea. So if we can fix what we've got, we're much better off.
Well, we have a lot of work to do, guys. So let's wrap it up on A Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century by Heather Hying and Brett Weinstein. And we will see you next time on Unity Now podcast. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for watching the Unity Now podcast. We'll be back with another conversation that highlights the political middle ground to unite Americans and end the ideological war. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. Please comment below and hit that subscribe button.
Bye.